You've been grinding, applying, searching, waking up every day with hope in your heart and pressure on your back. You've knocked on doors, sent resumes, made calls, and still nothing moves. Silence, rejection, delay, and in the middle of that frustration, there's a whisper deep in your spirit that says, stop, not because you're lazy, not because you're not trying hard enough, but because God is saying something bigger. Don't look for work, not because He wants you to sit still forever, but because He's trying to get your attention. He's trying to shift your focus from survival to surrender, from chasing opportunities to hearing instruction. This isn't a shutdown, it's a setup, a moment where heaven presses pause, not to punish you, but to position you. What if God isn't telling you to give up, but to look up? What if the delay isn't denial, but divine redirection? You're not being left behind, you're being led somewhere higher. There's a certain kind of frustration that comes when you've done everything right, but nothing is happening. You've prayed, you've applied, you've showed up, and still the door doesn't open. The world will tell you to push harder, hustle more, grind until it happens. But sometimes heaven has a different instruction. Wait, not because you're not ready to move, but because the move isn't ready for you. This is where trust in God's divine timing becomes more than a nice idea. It becomes a choice, a discipline, a deep-rooted faith that says, God, even though I don't see it, I still believe you're working. God doesn't operate on our schedule. He's not pressured by deadlines, application cutoffs, or worldly clocks. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of your story, and He knows the exact moment when everything aligns. What feels like a delay is often divine protection. What feels like a missed opportunity might be God saving you from something that looked good, but wasn't built for you. Sometimes we knock on doors so hard that we bruise our hands, trying to force our way into something God already closed. And yet we question Him, we ask, why not me? But maybe the better question is, God, what are you preparing me for that I can't see yet? Waiting on God's timing doesn't mean sitting in idleness. It means preparing in faith. It means using this season not to panic, but to grow, to sharpen your gifts, to learn patience, to listen more closely. Because when God does open that door, you won't walk through it blindly. You'll walk through it ready. God never wastes time, even if it feels wasted to us. Every quiet moment, every unanswered prayer, every no is building something in you. He's refining your character, strengthening your faith, and clearing the path ahead of you. It's easy to trust God when things are moving. It's harder when things are still. But true faith is trusting His hand when you can't trace His plan. And sometimes the delay is the very thing saving you. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and thank God for every door that didn't open, every opportunity that passed you by, every moment that felt like a setback. Because now you can see it clearly. It wasn't a denial. It was divine timing. So if you feel stuck, if you feel forgotten, if you're wondering why nothing is shifting, take a deep breath. God hasn't forgotten you. He's just aligning everything so that when it's time, it won't be forced. It will flow. And when it flows, no one will be able to stop what He has for you. The timing won't just be right. It will be divine. You won't have to chase what God sends. It will meet you right where you are, right on time. Let me know if you'd like this styled for a video script, sermon, or short. There's a difference between being hired and being called. The world hires you for your skill set. God calls you for your purpose. A job may give you a title, a paycheck, and a role, but a calling gives you direction, identity, and eternal impact. When God says, don't look for work, He's not telling you to stop growing, stop moving, or stop believing. He's telling you to stop chasing positions that don't align with your purpose, because when you know you're called, you don't panic when you're not hired. You understand that a calling can't be denied by man, delayed by circumstance, or limited by a resume. Being called means you were chosen before you were born. It means you were designed with a specific mission in mind, a divine assignment that no job description could ever fully capture. That's why some roles you once prayed for no longer satisfy you. That's why certain environments drain you, even if they seem like great opportunities on paper. You're not just made to fit into a system, you're made to shift atmospheres. You were never meant to settle into what's available. You were meant to walk boldly into what's appointed. Too often, we reduce our identity to what we do. We introduce ourselves by our roles, our titles, our achievements. But your worth doesn't come from your job, it comes from your Creator. When you truly understand you are called, your mindset changes. You no longer chase opportunities out of desperation. You move with confidence, knowing that if God opens a door, no one can close it. And if He closes a door, it's because He's redirecting you to something greater. Sometimes we confuse being busy with being purposeful. We accept jobs that pay well but cost us peace. We pursue promotions that feed our pride but starve our spirit. But when you follow your calling, something shifts. You no longer settle for what's convenient. You wait for what's ordained. You stop asking, "What job can I get?" and start asking, "What impact am I called to make?" And yes, there will be seasons when the calling doesn't come with a paycheck yet, when the assignment feels bigger than your resources, when people around you don't understand why you turned down that opportunity or left that position. But that's the nature of calling. It won't always make sense to others. It's not about applause, status, or security. It's about obedience. It's about trusting that if God called you, He will sustain you. He will provide for you. He will open the doors that lead not just to employment, but to destiny. So if you feel like nothing is working right now, take heart. You're not being punished. You're being protected. Maybe God is holding you back from what's good so you can be positioned for what's great. Maybe He's reminding you that your value isn't in being hired by man, but in being called by Him. When you know you're called, you no longer chase seats at tables. You build the one He told you to build, and you trust that the right people, the right resources, and the right moment will come. Not because you forced it, but because you followed Him. We live in a world that celebrates constant motion. If you're not doing something, people assume you're doing nothing. Productivity is praised while stillness is questioned. But in God's kingdom, rest is not wasted time. It's sacred time. It's not a sign that you've fallen behind. It's a sign that God is getting ready to take you somewhere that hustle alone can't carry you. When God says, "Don't look for work," it might not be because you're finished. It might be because He's still working on something you can't see. Rest isn't always about sleeping or stopping. It's about trusting. It's about learning how to let go of the need to constantly fix, force, or figure everything out. When you rest in God, you're not quitting. You're surrendering. You're saying, "God, I trust your timing more than I trust my own efforts." That kind of rest requires faith. Because it's easier to stay busy than to be still. It's easier to run toward the next thing than to sit and wait for what's right. There are seasons where God will intentionally pull you back, not to punish you, but to preserve you. Not to waste your gifts, but to prepare your heart. You may feel hidden, you may feel forgotten, but in reality you're being protected from things you don't even know are coming. In rest, God heals what hustle ignores. He strengthens what stress has weakened. He whispers truth that the noise of the world drowns out. Some of the most transformative things God will ever do in your life won't happen while you're working. They'll happen while you're resting. Because rest creates room. It gives God space to move, space to speak, and space to realign your focus. If you're always running, you'll miss the direction. If you're always forcing, you'll miss the flow. But when you rest, you allow God to lead. Think about this. Even in the creation story, God rested, not because He was tired, but because He was finished, and we're made in His image, which means rest is part of our design. It's not just a pause in the journey, it's part of the journey. Without rest, you burn out. Without rest, you miss the beauty of the process. God didn't create you to just keep going until you collapse. He created you to walk with Him, not run ahead of Him. So if you're in a season where things have slowed down, if the opportunities seem quiet, and if the doors aren't opening like you thought they would, breathe. Don't panic. You're not behind. You're being held. You're being readied. You're being restored for something greater. Rest doesn't mean you've lost your way. It often means you're right where God wants you. Let the world keep rushing. Let others keep striving. You're learning to trust in a different rhythm now. One that's not driven by fear but led by faith. One that doesn't exhaust you but elevates you. Because when the rest ends and God says go, you'll go further, faster, and freer than you ever could have on your own. Rest is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your breakthrough. One of the greatest fears people face when they feel called by God to pause, to shift, or to step into something unfamiliar is the fear of lack. It's the fear of, how will I provide for myself? How will I survive if I'm not working? How can I walk in obedience when I don't see the resources? But the truth is, God never calls you without preparing the provision. He doesn't give vision without supplying the tools to fulfill it. Provision doesn't come first, obedience does. And when you move in obedience, provision follows, not always instantly, not always how you expect, but always on time and always enough. When God told Elijah to leave the brook and go to Zarephath, He didn't give him a 5-step financial plan. He gave him a direction, and when Elijah obeyed, God had already prepared a widow to feed him. The blessing was waiting at the place of obedience. That's how it works. When you stop chasing what the world says you need and start walking toward what God has instructed, what you need begins to meet you along the way. You don't have to chase blessings when you're following your calling. They will find you where God sends you. Sometimes we delay obedience because we want all the details first. We want the guarantee, the paycheck, the backup plan. But God rarely gives all the answers up front because He's trying to build your faith, not your comfort. He wants you to move not because everything makes sense, but because you trust Him enough to follow His voice. Provision is attracted to faith. When you step out in faith, heaven responds. That doesn't mean the journey will be easy. You might have to walk through uncertainty. You might have to make sacrifices. But even in those moments, God sustains. He provides in creative ways, through people, through unexpected opportunities, through doors you didn't even know existed. Provision isn't always money. Sometimes it's peace in the storm. Sometimes it's clarity in confusion. Sometimes it's strength to keep going one more day. Whatever you need to fulfill the assignment, God supplies it in the right measure at the right moment. And this is why obedience matters, because God's provision is tied to His purpose, not your preferences. If you're operating outside of what He's called you to do, you might find yourself striving, grinding, and constantly feeling empty, because you're trying to fund something He never told you to build. But when you walk in alignment, you walk under the covering of divine support. You stop depending on your hustle and start trusting His hand. So if God is telling you, don't look for work, it's not because He's cutting you off from provision. It's because He's trying to reconnect you to the source of provision. He wants you to know that your job was never your provider. He is. And once you settle that in your spirit, you can walk in peace, even when things don't look certain. Because you'll know where God guides, He provides, every time.